welcome to the first Inside the Mix tutorial episode. So this episode is going to be different to the usual ones in that there is going to be no interview. So it's just going to be me talking about mixing techniques that I like to use. So this week we're going to be looking at sidechain compression. So I'm just going to pull up my mix here. So this is a mix for my latest single actually. So this is called Take Me Back, and it features the singer Indigo, fantastic UK singer. So what I'm going to look at here in particular is the use of sidechain compression. And sidechain compression used on a synth pad. So this is a synth, it's called the Ultra Trance Saw pad. So this is what it sounds like at the moment. This is just with the kick. So as you can hear, we've got a nice sort of lush sounding saw, and at the moment there is no ducking with the kick. So what I want to do is I'm going to use sidechain compression to add a bit of movement. So what I do is I've got the left and the right here. So the left and the right. And what I've done is I've added a compressor. So I've used the kilohertz compressor, just a simple compressor on both channels. So as you can see here are my settings. So now what will happen is when I play the track back, you should hear what is sort of an audible pumping sound. So what I've done to create this is I've sidechained the kick to the kilohertz compressor. So what I can do is in the sidechain feature on this particular plugin, now you should be able to do this on any compressor plugin, any stock compressor. So the sidechain I've set as input 3 and 4 in particular on the kilohertz compressor. And then what I can do is I can go up to the input at the top, and I can find the bus that I've used to bus out my kick. In this instance, I've used bus 1. I always use bus 1 for my kicks. So what happens now is the sidechain is going to recognize the symbol coming from my kick. So then what I do is I adjust the threshold. And I adjust the threshold so the compressor starts to trigger. So I'll just demo it. So I'm going to move the threshold up here. And you can see, or hear rather, that there is no compression. So I'm going to slowly bring the compressor threshold down. And you can begin to hear the pumping. Now it's important also to bear in mind the use of attack and release and the ratio in particular on this. So with my compressor here, I've got the attack set all the way down to the fastest possible setting, and the release is reasonably fast as well. And the ratio I've got set to 5:1. Now you can play around with the ratio to enhance the audible effect. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play around with the attack and release so you can get an idea of what that would sound like if you were to change it. So I'm going to let's bring the threshold down a bit. There we go. You can properly hear that now. And I'm going to increase the attack. So that's 15, 17, so that's 30 milliseconds. You can start to hear how the effect is slightly later. So we'll leave that there. Now I'm going to increase the release. So you can see how it's quite skewing it now, but that's with a slow release now. So that's set about 250 milliseconds and 100 milliseconds on the attack. But as I said, I like to have a fast attack, so I'm going to bring that all the way back again and bring my release back. So that's a release time of about 5 milliseconds. I generally leave the makeup or the gain at sort of 0. I don't actually go and alter that. So that's sidechain compression with trance pads and a kick. So what I'm going to do now is just going to demo how it sounds in and out in the full mix. So another sidechain technique that I like to use is sidechaining the kick to the bass. So in this instance, I don't actually use the same compressor as I used before, which is the kilohertz compressor. I actually use the Wave C6 sidechain. So it's a multi-band compressor, this one in particular. So what I like to do with this one is I find out the fundamental frequency of my kick. In this instance, it sort of sits around sort of 500 sits around 50 to 60 hertz. So it sounds something like this. Okay, so another sidechain compression technique I like to use. So another sidechain compression technique I like to use is I like to sidechain the kick to the actual bass. And I like to use that to create space in the sub-frequencies and the low-end frequencies for the kick to poke through without having to use a high-pass filter and sort of roll off all of the low end of the bass. So in this instance, I don't use the same one as I used before, which is the kilohertz compressor. What I like to use is the Waves C6 multiband compressor. And that compressor in particular has a unique feature in that I can actually move this particular band around. So I've got what is essentially a band pass filter that I can move up and down on the Waves C6. And what I use that for is I sort of target the fundamental frequency of the kick. So this is what it sounds like without. So this is just kick and the bass. Okay, so what I do is I find out the fundamental frequency of the kick, and I will then set this band pass in the Wave C6 to that fundamental frequency. So at the moment it sort of sits around 60 hertz. And then what I'll do is I'll just lower the threshold, or the range in this instance, which is in the C6. I have a relatively fast attack again, as I did with the synth, and a relatively fast release. Actually, in this instance, I use the ARC release in the Wave C6, which is an automatic release. And I also use the opto sort of behavior as well, which is a sort of kicks in a lot faster. And what I'll do is I will, as I said, I've targeted that fundamental frequency. So that way, once again, I've sidechained using bus 1, which is the kick bus. So I've sidechained that to this particular compressor. Once again, top right, as all compressors are generally. I use Logic, but I'm sure in any other DAW you'll find that the sidechain feature generally is at the top right, and you can find that kick bus. And what I've done is, as you can see, for those who are watching the video, or rather you can hear in a minute, you should be able to hear just a slight ducking of the bass frequencies around 60 hertz, and that just lets the kick poke through that little bit more. So this is what it sounds like with the compressor. So I'm going to drag down the range, rather the threshold, and then I'm going to drag down the range. So you can drag down the gain as well to make a more audible effect, and also the range. But I like to set the gain so it sort of comes back to unity gain, because I don't want it to be too exaggerated. I just want it to be sort of like half a dB, just so it pokes through that a little bit more. So this is it in the full mix. Now, as you can hear with this particular track, I've used a lot of sidechain compression, to be honest, because it is a dance track and I want to have that exaggerated movement, because I think having those frequencies ducking in and out helps a lot. Another technique that I like to use as well with sidechain compression is I will sidechain the vocal to sort of the synth bus, as it were. And what that allows me to do is, because I've got a lot of synths going on in my music. There's a lot of synth. As you can see here, I have many, many tracks of synth, and there's a lot of effects tracks as well. And using Sidechain Compression, I use the multi-band compression as well in the C6, and I will target sort of like those presence frequencies. So generally, it depends on if it's a male or a female voice and the timbre of the voice, but I like to use female vocals a lot, and it sort of sits around sort of 4 to 6 kilohertz. And I'll find that band pass again using the Wave C6, and I will just duck those synth frequencies just so that vocal can poke through a bit more. So I pick and choose, really. I use a lot of mixture of overall just multi-band compression and a normal compressor. If I want it to be really subtle and I want to focus and hone in on specific frequencies, I'll use a multi-band, as I've used on the bass and the vocal. And if I want it to be just specifically on the whole track, as it were, itself, or the whole instrument, like I did with the synth, I use just a normal everyday compressor. It's probably the wrong way of putting it. But yeah, hopefully that gives you some ideas of how you can use multi-band compression. It's very much, I like to experiment with it. Sometimes the exaggerated effects sound great. It's something new, something interesting, particularly in this sort of experimental style of music. There will be more of these episodes as the weeks progress. They are shorter episodes, so there are no interviews, but hopefully you'll be able to take some mix and production ideas away from these episodes. So please do join the Facebook community. You'll find a link in the show notes where you can find more exclusive content to do with the podcast, and look out for the next episode.